Hello everyone and welcome back to the Borg Skeptic channel. Today we have we have Drew Eldridge as our guest, who will be talking to us for I think you said about 30 to 45 minutes, didn't you?
Yeah, I have about 30 minutes now. Hi, Katie and Justin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So and today's
No,
co-host is Justin the Fad. Welcome back
thank you
again,
so
Justin.
much, and thank you, Drew, for being here. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
There we go. I've sorted out the webcams. We weren't showing webcams there for a second. Yeah, so today's format for the show is we're going to be chatting with Drew for 30 to 45 minutes, and then we're going to have Josh the Archon on for the rest of the show as our guest number two. So let's, before we start, actually, I'd like to shout out those who are in the chat. We've got JS the Mess, welcome, and we've got Cat the Humanist, welcome to the shows once again. Thank you for being here.
Welcome.
We also have the Fad in the
Yes, thank
chat,
you for
who's
being
obviously the co-host.
here.
I'd like to as well shout out Justin's channel because Justin
Thank
does his
you.
own content. Have you got anything interesting coming up?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm still in Genesis, and I don't know how much you know about Genesis, and I'd hate to give you any spoilers. I mean, it's all just come out. But Sarah just died, and I know that there's some spicy stuff that happens after that. So if you enjoy listening to the Bible in a little bit of a different perspective, I try to do it from the perspective of more of a comic book. I'd love to see you. My name's The Fad. That's my YouTube channel. I can drop a link in the chat or hit me up. I'm on the EA show, or not on the EA show. I'm in the chat there. I'll be here. You can find me everywhere.
Okie doke. And so let's get into the conversation. So me and you, Drew, we were having a conversation on your channel. I think it was a number of weeks ago now, wasn't it?
Yes, and mine is called Christian Voices.
It's a really good channel, so I would definitely suggest anybody to check that out. It's Drew's doing some really interesting stuff over there.
Oh, thank you.
That's very
Um,
cool.
yeah,
What
so
what's going on over there, if I may ask, because I haven't had the opportunity to go check that out.
Well, a few weeks ago, we had a conversation with some folks who called in and wanted to talk about defunding the police. Have you ever heard of
Okay.
the defund the police movement?
yeah, I've heard of that.
And
Yeah.
and actually to abolish the police in the city that I live in.
Ooh.
Oh wow.
So,
I know that it's happened, correct? And I don't know, at least one city, if I'm not mistaken.
well, I'm in up in Canada. I'm in
Oh,
Winnipeg,
okay. Okay,
and
very cool.
I don't think they've been defunded here. But so I have conversations with people, often who are in our neighborhood, and often with people who are in disagreement, or Christians who want to speak up and say something. We were talking about my last podcast was about the new proposed legislation for banning um, conversion therapy in Canada.
Mm.
And so we had an apologist on talking about that. And we've done a few others of people sharing their testimonies, their Christian testimonies. And yeah, we have lots of interesting stuff coming up too. We're still quite new, though. We're still
Well,
quite new.
that's very cool. I have to give it a check out.
Yeah.
Leave the link if you can.
Hmm.
Yeah, if you leave us the link after the show, then I'll post it in the description of the video.
Cool,
Great.
cool.
Yeah, so yeah, you're doing some really good stuff over there. I really enjoyed our conversation that we had. I think we
Me too.
delved into some really good stuff there. Um, I like the idea of trying to find some sort of middle ground between, theism and atheism, because at the moment it seems like a us and them sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I love this show and other shows of that nature. I have been able to spend a good amount of time watching, whether it be productive debate, because there is productive debate. There are people that believe that the debate isn't necessarily to try to convince the other person, but more to put their ideas out there to the watchers. But in this sort of content, to not debate, but to have friendly conversations and just try to understand people better. That's so great in my opinion. I really enjoy getting to do that.
That's how I see it too, Justin. Trying to understand each other better is a good way of approaching it, because oftentimes I find that Christians will say things that about atheists that are laughable, really, because I've read a lot of the atheist books, and so I kind of know where they're coming from, how they think, and when I hear some Christians talk about them, it's kind of a little uncomfortable, because they clearly haven't talked to many,
Yeah,
and vice versa. I've talked to atheists who um, who come across the same way sometimes, and that's not good in a democracy where we are voting. We're all voting, right? And so you don't want to make enemies in a democracy. Really, you don't want to. There are things that Christians and atheists, I think, can come together on, like freedom of thought and freedom of speech. For one, we both want that, and also I would say the separation of church and state. There's a Christian argument for that, just as there would be an atheistic one. And I think that good conversations can help create, can help, well, de-escalate some of the emotion involved in some of these debates, and yeah, bring people into a place where they can cooperate and fight on the same side, which is what we need lots of in a democracy.
I completely agree with you. Not to completely pull it off subject, but you said something about free speech, and I know it's neither here nor there, but it made me wonder. It seems as if you're an advocate of free speech. Um, how far, if you're willing to answer, how far do you take that? Like absolutist, or you just
Well,
I don't know.
I don't think you should be able to yell, fire on an airplane, for example.
Yes.
Um, I don't think you should be able to do things like, um, well, like bully someone, follow them home from school, and bullies will do that, and assaulting them in that way. Um,
Yeah.
those sorts of things, which are clearly meant for uh, nothing but hatred and just bullying someone. That's a little bit different. But when it comes to ideas and the freedom to express ideas, yeah, I would say that I like to have everything on the table, to especially the ideas that are most controversial, because um, I believe that rather than trying to, if you want to get rid of those ideas, the best thing to do is, take it up on a stage and knock it down, right? Rather than try and put everything, you know, send it underground. So
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you for saying that. That's a different way than I've ever put it, but I completely agree. People should be able to put their ideas out there, whether some people think that they're not worth being able to put out there. we will never be able to address the ideas that need to be addressed if everybody's too afraid to talk about them.
Exactly. And also, I would say that when you're trying to get to the truth, you have to have freedom to be wrong, right? You have to be, and so just because an idea is wrong or bad or something doesn't mean that it shouldn't be voiced or considered. You can learn a lot from even well, right now the big bad wolf is the white supremacists, right? And I've taken a look at some of their material, and of course I disagree with it completely, but you learn a lot about how someone thinks and how someone can go wrong, and they're so normal in every other way, but then in this one way they're just, how does that work? And so I find that you can learn a lot by reading and studying things you disagree with, especially.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you've got if if an idea is wrong, in my opinion, it should be voiced more than in some senses than a right opinion, because that's the only way that
Sure.
you're going to call out that opinion for being wrong. It's the only way you can, in a sense, criticize a false opinion and try to debate, what is right and what is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it comes
I
to mind
completely agree.
flat earthers and things like that. Obviously, there's these conspiracies that go around, and in a sense, they're demonstrably wrong according to the science that we know. Um, so we should be able to hear their opinions and then correct them where they're going wrong.
It's useful for raising questions too, with a child, for example. Raising the question. These sorts of ideas can raise questions in a classroom setting about, well, what shape is the Earth? How do we know? What sources can you go to trust? Can you do an experiment? And so I
Hmm.
think that they're useful for all kinds of things. And
Yeah.
also, we want to be honest too. You see, if we make some things illegal or whatever, some ideas, then suddenly people can't say what they really think. And that's just an awful way to live. I want someone, like as a Christian, if someone wants me to, they think I'm deluded or something, they want to help me, I view it as an act of love for them to come and try and talk me out of it. It's like I'm not offended by that. I want them to if it's sincere and if it's in good, if their heart is in the right place.
Yeah. So
I don't
talk.
want to roller coaster this whole thing, but maybe to get back to something we like to talk about around here. From what I understand, you were an atheist for a portion of your
Yeah.
life, and as you have declared on this show already, you are now a Christian. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that at all?
Well, I told the full version of that you can find on Justin Downing's show. Do you know him?
Very good show, the
Yes.
EA show. I
Yeah,
definitely,
I went on his
yeah.
show and I gave a long spiel on that. And there's also a longer one on my website. You can view my full testimony there.
Okay.
But yeah, I wouldn't say I was an, an atheist. I was more. I guess you would say I was an agnostic atheist.
Mm.
And in university I became obsessed with the question of um, God and and it's such an important, it was such an important question, I realized. And that's one thing atheists get too. uh, you guys realize it's important. You might not believe it, but it's an important question. Whether or not there's a God, it makes a big difference, really. I think it does, or I thought it did too. And so in university I was obsessed with it. I was really into literature, and I would study the atheist stuff and the theistic stuff. And I was slowly dragged to deism and to believing in there's some sort of transcendent something, most probably, maybe not, but I thought, yeah, I thought there was something. And then the next step after that was being slowly dragged to Christianity. And um, and so, yeah, it was really an intellectual journey for a long time. And then it was more of a spiritual journey where I would step out of the armchair and try and put things to the test, so to speak, and ask myself, what do I really believe about this and that, and how do I live? Because there's a difference between what you think you believe and what you really believe. If you want to know what someone really, if you want to know what someone thinks they believe, just ask them. But if you want to know what they really believe, you can watch how they live, and you can do that to yourself too. And the philosophy I was reading taught me how to do that, how to observe myself. And when I come to something, I don't look at it like it's a piece of paper. I try to make it come alive. And do I live as though this is true, despite what I think? And so that really changed a lot for me when I was considering these questions as my approach. And I owe that to the ancient philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and their teacher Socrates, and then more modern philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Shakespeare played a really big role in how I approached these questions.
You seem very well read. That's very cool.
Well,
Yeah,
I've read a bit.
I watched the EA show that you were on with Justin and Bryce, and I was very interested in the philosophical arguments that you were that you were using, the philosophical arguments that led you to theism. Could you tell us a little bit more about the arguments that did convince you?
If I recall, the arguments I was talking about on his show were arguments that led me away from a naturalistic worldview, or in that direction, towards deism, towards belief in something transcendent. Now, do you want me to talk about those?
Yes.
Or do you want me to talk?
I think the argument that you were talking about fish in the oceans, and humans on the land. That argument interested me quite a lot.
Yeah, well, it comes from Shakespeare when Hamlet says to, I think, Horatio, there is more in the heavens than in your philosophy, Horatio, or something like that. And the fish analogy is like this. Well, fish and all the animals in the kind of hierarchy, however you want to put them, fish, they just know the world of the pond. They don't know the world of beyond the pond. I mean, unless they're a jumping fish or something like that. But fish, for the most part, they can't really apprehend the above world of land and sky. And the same goes for mice. Mice will know the land area. Some animals can go inside both, but they don't know the area of the sky. And birds know the sky, but they don't know space. They have no idea about what's out there, and they can't even, they're so evolved that they can't apprehend it. And so, and on and on and on. And so it made me think that, well, does it end with human beings? We observe the universe. We have our telescope that can observe the red light shift and all these galaxies. Probably, there's probably more than we apprehend as human beings. And it seemed to me that wasn't some sort of argument that led to that for certain. It could be the case that it does end with us. But I thought, especially I was reading a lot of, Richard Dawkins at the time, and who was saying, talking about how we were half a chromosome away from a chimpanzee, right? And so it would be odd for everything to just end with what we can apprehend. And so that really opened my mind to other possibilities. And I got into other things like learning in science about the possibility of other dimensions, fourth, fifth dimensions, things like that, that scientists talk about all the time as possibilities. And so I got really into that stuff.
That's
Yeah.
very interesting to me, because I've definitely gone down that road pretty
Hmm.
well. But I started out as a believer at a very young age, and
Mm.
then I started learning about these things. But it's really interesting that you spent time studying these things and ended up deciding to give your life to Jesus. So I find
Yeah.
that an interesting story to hear.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, what I'm interested in is, so I can understand that, that because I do quite a lot of study within physics and things.
Hmm.
So I can understand that there's possibly something more than what we can comprehend right now. Extra dimensions, a multiverse, infinite space. Any one of those.
Yeah.
What I struggle to make the connection with is how you can go from that to, okay, there's this extra realm. Now there's a god that lives in that realm. I struggle to see the connection.
Yeah. Yeah. So certainly for me at that point, I didn't jump from there to that conclusion.
Mm,
That when I was talking to Justin Downing, um, that was a stepping stone to making me more open-minded and to exposing me to other things, I guess.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think it would follow from that argument that therefore there's a God. Certainly not.
So what further evidence would there be for a god? What would be that next stepping stone?
A next stepping stone for their a god would be arguments I heard like the Kalam cosmological argument,
Mm.
which didn't really impress me all that much when I first saw it, like kind of on paper, until I started. Do you guys know this argument? You probably
Is
have
that the
heard.
one about a god being ultimately great? There must be an ultimately great being.
This one is everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause.
Ah, right, yeah. So I was getting mixed up there with another one.
There are lots. It's easy to get confused, but the first two premises there, I discovered that I believed and that I lived as though they were true. I mean, the second premise, I've always thought that, believed in the Big Bang Theory. I was reading lots of science, and I thought, yeah, I do believe that the universe began to exist. At some point, there wasn't anything, and that's not very controversial. Lots of people believe that. But I
Mm.
believed that I acted in accordance with the first premise too. And and so for me, the question was less about what's true, and more about whether I wanted to face what I really believed. That's how I felt, anyways. Like, because I would come up with these, you could call them refutations of, say, premise one, right, of the argument, which people try to do, and I would kind of try and do that. But at the end of the day, I realized there's no way I would, in anything I did in my life, it it all confirmed that I held premise one as a deep conviction in the way I lived, and
Mm.
and uh, and premise one's really a kind of denial of magic, the idea that things can just pop into being out of absolutely nothing, uncaused, inexplicably. I don't live as though that's the case. I live as though the causal principle is true in that way, and so therefore, for me, I had to kind of face that, and which was kind of difficult and uncomfortable. And I had lots of late nights, you could say, at the library with questions like that. And then so I decided, the conclusion followed logically. So and and the conclusion, of course, to that argument is that there's a timeless, and in case people don't know it, there's a timeless, spaceless, immaterial something, and so that opened another door for me. Now I believed in that there was some sort of powerful something that banged the Big Bang into existence, but that I didn't think that was, I think that was anything religious. That was purely me looking at the premises as honestly as I could, and as unbiasedly as I could, because I really worked hard to study the arguments and counter arguments, and at the highest level too. Like a lot of like the defender of that argument is William Lane Craig, and
Yes.
probably, and in academia, the foremost critic of him, the heaviest hitting critic, atheist critic, would be Graham Oppie, who's a really strong academic atheist in the academic world. Not many people know about him, but in the academic world, he's a really big deal as an atheist. And so I would try and find the best people I could and then read their stuff, and to try and make sure that I wasn't biased, because that's what, as I said, the philosophers taught me how to do that. Plato really drilled that into me, and so I really wanted to do that. And not everyone does, but it's a good habit to get into.
So I've read a little bit of Plato, but something I was kind of excited to talk to you about before we came here is another thing that we kind of have an interest. There's a author that, from what I could tell, you are a fan of, C.S. Lewis.
Yes,
absolutely. And I've read a good fair amount of his fiction adult books, whether it be The Great Divorce or Mere Christianity. And I could name 4 right off the top of my head. But could you speak on at all, like his effect on your turn from atheism to Christianity? Because as at least you and I know, he was a former atheist.
Yes, and I really resonate with him and how he converted. It was very similar for me, actually. And he would really, his books, he sent me on a lot of, you could say, philosophical quests when I was reading him. I would go off on bread trails and read what the things he referenced. For me, I discovered C.S. Lewis's Christian work through a poem I was reading in university called Paradise Lost by John Milton and Paradise Regained, which is about the fall of Adam and Eve. And then Paradise Regained is about the temptation of Jesus in the desert. And it's really beautiful poetry. Atheists can enjoy it. Christians can. It's just a really well done work.
Almost all of his works, just because he is such a great author. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and so John Milton wrote these poems, and I was struggling to understand them. And so I read C.S. Lewis's. I found his preface to Paradise Lost, it was called. And I thought, oh, this guy's really smart. And so I looked up his other works, and that's how I eventually discovered Mere Christianity and things like this. And it's the guy who did all those Narnia books, right? And so, yeah.
I've never read a single Narnia book, and I've maybe seen bits of the movies because I have children, but I have been greatly inspired by him in my life, even without being a believer. So,
great.
He's quite the person.
Yeah, and his argument that really helped me was the question of the liar, lunatic, Lord argument, which again on paper didn't really impress me much, because it's just it's when I started to put it into action, right? I kind of started to try when I was considering Christianity. There came a point when I was trying to see if this worked, because I thought if Christianity's true, then if I do the things Jesus says, it'll work. right? It's going to be rock solid philosophy, and it's going to work, and it's going to. And so I kind of put him to the test a little bit, and for a few weeks, I became Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, basically. Have you seen that show? And
Yeah.
I literally,
Hi
for
diddly ho there.
yeah, I literally was almost weirdly nice to everyone, and I gave away way more than I was comfortable with, and I was just trying to follow his teachings as closely as I could, and because I was really trying to find out if this is true. And what I discovered was it was a transforming experience. My whole life, everything got better. I found my relationships got better. My emotionally, I got better. I felt better. Um, I was performing better at work, and sleeping better. Everything was just amazing, and I was learning more. I could recall things, and I would pray for something, and which was usually, because Jesus, what I prayed for at first, I was just praying to the walls, right? But I said, I got to pray for something, I guess, if I'm going to try being a Christian. And so I looked in the Bible, and Jesus says, essentially pray for the desire to have God's will done, right? God's something like, I can't remember what exactly it is, but your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So I prayed for the strength to just handle whatever came my way, essentially, and to pray for that, and then I would get it too. This weird thing happened to me, and that would be my only, I guess, supernatural feeling experience that I had. And so, but then I was faced with the question of C.S. Lewis, which is the liar, lunatic, Lord. Either Jesus was a liar or a fraud, or he was a lunatic, because he literally said things that, if they weren't true, man, he's not a good person. Because he led a
Yeah,
lot of people
absolutely.
to their deaths, like a lot of people to their deaths, and he did a lot of things and said a lot of things that would be really awful if he isn't who he claimed to be. And so I was presented this in a very visceral way, not in I wasn't doing armchair philosophy now. I was asking myself, who do I think this guy is? And I found that I couldn't honestly say that I didn't think he was stupid, this guy, because the stuff he was teaching worked, at least for me. I couldn't say that he was an evil person too. The way all the guy had to do to get out of being crucified was say he wasn't the Son of God. Really, if he just said that, they had nothing against great moral teachers, but the blasphemy of him, and what motive for that? It didn't, and to have such, at the same time, such amazing teachings, at least that's how it seemed to me. And so I was faced with that question, and I didn't just make a decision. I had a realization that I believed this guy wasn't deluded or evil. And as C.S. Lewis says, the conclusion to draw would then be to call him Lord, or that he is who he claims to be. And I was studying others too, like the atheists, who would say things like, well, he could be a myth too. They would try and say liar, lunatic, Lord, or myth, and they try. But I would study that too. I'd follow up on that, and that didn't make sense to me, that he would be mythological. But that's a whole nother subject. But anyways, this led me to face that, and it led me to identify as a Christian, because I said, what am I going to do now? This works. I love this. I don't want to change anything. So what am I going to do? And I decided that I'm going to keep doing that. And I got to call myself something. I guess I'm a Christian. So I Googled church, and I went, and then I tried to find somewhere, and
That's very interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard that phrase, Google Church, but I completely understand
yeah, I
what
had
you're
to do
saying.
something, and it was cool.
Yeah. Right. I want to do, and this is kind of probably strange, but I do want to do a quick call out to C.S. Lewis more so than I already have. As I already can tell, Drew Eldridge probably has read these books, but for any of the people in the chat, whether you are religious or spiritual or non religious, there are two books that I highly recommend, and there's his fiction adult books, and one of them is called The Great Divorce. It's a phenomenal book, and the other one is called The Screw Tape Letters, which
Yes.
is a really, really fun book.
Yes.
And no matter what you believe, you can. I think you can have a lot of fun reading those.
And he's great if you're an atheist and you want to just try and understand Christians and where they're coming from. So just for that understanding, he's a great person to go to.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that. He's a very smart person, and although we may not agree on everything, I do enjoy him. Like we're saying, he created the world of Narnia, and if you actually research that, he is a very, very creative mind. So
Yes, yes.
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was my plug for C.S. Lewis.
There was one point with what you were saying about Jesus, and you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the atheist argument of the mythicism.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't sit on either side of the fence of this, but
Mm-hmm.
I can understand the arguments against a mythical Jesus. As I say, I wouldn't sit on either side of the argument, but I do understand. How about the argument that Jesus did exist?
Mm-hmm.
He was a good man. He did some good things that made him stand out from other people
Mm-hmm.
of the time period. Uh, but none of the magical stuff that he did, none of this
Mm-hmm.
supernatural stuff actually occurred. He was just a man. He wasn't the son of God. How about that argument?
Well, that wouldn't make sense of his crucifixion, because the Jewish people, I mean, he was a rabbi in his early life, Jesus, and so there wasn't there he wouldn't have ruffled any feathers that way. And so in the context historically, someone who was a good man, who had good teachings, and many of his teachings were perfectly Jewish, right? And were more of reminders than anything else of of things. And so it wouldn't. My problem with that is that it wouldn't make sense with how they treated him. Even claiming to be the Messiah wasn't really against the law, I don't believe. It was more. It was really blasphemous. The kind of thing that would get you killed would be if you said that you were the I am of the Old Testament, like he did in reportedly in his biographies
Hmm.
and the ancient biographies written about him. Um, that would get you in big trouble, and no one would stand for that in those days. And what happened historically after, if you study the lives of the early Christians and things like this, um, they behaved um, in a manner that, because they went off and they spread the word, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they would usually die. I think almost all the disciples were reportedly killed, and you wouldn't get killed for just teaching good things and like that. And so I don't. And so, because there were lots of moral teachers, great moral teachers back then, and and certainly the Romans wouldn't have cared too. Um, and so that would be my one reason why I don't believe he could have just been, well, that would be his self-understanding. I would say that the evidence suggests, regardless of what you think it's true, I would say the evidence suggests that Jesus and the early Christians believed him to be God incarnate. And you can actually do this by looking at the sorts of things Christians argued about after he was gone. For example, Jesus said nothing about circumcision, so everyone was arguing about that because they were like, well, what do we do? What do we do? Do we do that or not? Or do you have to become a Jew before becoming a Christian? Or can you just become a Christian? They would argue about that in their letters and stuff, and try to figure out what Jesus would want. And so, and they would argue about how to think of Jesus in terms of the Trinity. Like, how do we sit back and conceptualize this? But they didn't really argue about who he claimed to be. It was more they were arguing about how to make sense of that. Like, is he God, the Son of God? And so the behavior of the Christians after, and what we know about him in his biographies, I think suggests that he identified in that way. Now, regarding the miracles, could they be allegorical? Like healing the blind. Maybe he healed them allegorically and not physically. I see no reason why it can't be both, first of all. And I would say that the best way to figure out the best way to approach that, I would say, is to try and figure out what the early Christians thought of him. And they, for example, they did believe they saw him after he was killed, and reportedly, people reported that they really believed they saw him, and that would be supernatural in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And they were so I'm not sure what else to say about that, but it's I believe that he would perform those miracles because why wouldn't he? If he was God, then it would be really easy for him to do, first of all. So for me, the question is, who is he? If you believe he is who he says he was, as I did, then it's very easy to believe that he performed those miracles literally. But if you're an atheist, then or something, or you're not a Christian, then I could see how you would come to the conclusion
a very big if at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the answer to that will depend on where the person's coming from. But from a Christian perspective, it's not hard at all to believe that he did supernatural things. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So in other words, the level of evidence needed depends on the person's belief before going into the question.
We all have intellectual baggage we bring into these questions. And if a person's a naturalist, then it's just impossible that he did any of those things. And when you study the history, the premises of arguments and whatnot are going to strike you as much less plausible. How can Jesus rise from the dead if God doesn't exist? How can he be resurrected if there's no God to resurrect him? And so it depends on what a person's read and their life experience too. So it depends on perspective, I would say, of what we bring in. And that's why early on, these sorts of things wouldn't have impressed me very much, because I didn't have these more supernatural seeming experiences. After I started having that, then it changed things. I always say Christians don't believe in Jesus because of the Bible. We believe in the Bible because of Jesus. Does that make some sense? We don't. Yeah, that's how I would put it.
Yeah, it's very interesting,
I
and
I had a quick question, if I can throw it in
Hmm.
there. Speaking of miracles in the New Testament, and how you were saying that there's a possibility that some may be allegorical, and I believe that you said it's kind of there are a lot of subjective views of it. Do you have the same idea of the Old Testament and the miracles that were performed in the Old Testament as you do in the New Testament?
Here's the thing. The Old Testament's a really weird book, and I wouldn't believe in anything in the Old Testament unless I was a Christian. And the only reason I believe in the Old Testament is because of Jesus. And so he's the stepping stone, or that he's the stick in the mud, you could say, that forces me to just to, because he claims to come in the tradition of the Old Testament. And so therefore, what I do is I affirm the Old Testament is true as a Christian. I feel compelled to do that. But in what way it's true, I'm pretty open about it.
That's cool.
yeah,
So it could be the case that much of it was allegorical, or some of it was colored in with language, because it was a book written for not just scholars, but for all of mankind, for children even to understand. And so it's very probable that these stories were colored in um, with with to make them come alive more, or maybe not. Maybe it's all literal. I don't know. I kind of leave that to I put that on the back burner, because as a Christian, there are more questions that I wrestle with. Just getting through the day without sinning is really hard, right?
Well,
And
and of
so,
course, and
yeah,
those had to be left to pretty much authorities above ourselves. I was just kind of wondering
yeah,
what your opinion on it was. I know I can't answer the question. I can't answer many questions. That's why I like to say I'm never wrong, because
yeah.
I'll tell you if I know, and if I don't know, I'll let you know
Hmm.
as well.
mhm,
Yeah, yeah. And I think that I have no problem looking at the Old Testament and saying, I don't know how that worked. Did Moses really part the seas and all that? And did God part the seas for Moses? Did that really happen just like in the movie? Or did something just, was it just such a crazy journey across an ocean that you might as well just say the seas parted? It was so crazy. And maybe God was involved in that somehow. And then afterwards, you write it down in a way to communicate that to people. I don't know. Or maybe they really did part in this way. I just leave that open. My plan is, after I die, I'm going to ask God, how'd you do it? And then
Saving
and
up
then
questions for heaven.
yeah, and then he'll say, well, maybe it's this or this, or maybe it'll be something really cool I didn't even think of. So
yeah. Well, I think
I'm
the
perfectly content with leaving many things to um, after I'm dead,
I
including things
think
like evolution. And
it's very reasonable to remain skeptical.
yeah,
yeah,
I do. Well, I wouldn't call it skepticism. I would just call it being humble. Because I'm not so skeptical about the Bible, the Old Testament being true. It's more about the way it's true, that
mm,
some humility needs to be put in place, because I'm not a scholar of all that. I don't know Hebrew and all that stuff. It takes a lifetime to study like one book in the Old Testament and become a master of it. And like, it would be kind of arrogant, I think, of me to presume to know that all the ins and outs. No, I don't know. I affirm it as a Christian, but I'm perfectly willing to just, um, yeah, suspend judgment.
That's cool, because I really, that's another aspect that I I really agree with you on. So
Oh, good.
yeah,
it's just so interesting that we can hold so many so many of the same kind of beliefs or ideas, and also hold such opposing ideas.
Yes.
And it's just I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I think, as far as like the Old Testament and stuff goes, and you'll attest to this, Justin. Uh, I think it's definitely a conversation all on its own. Um,
It is.
Maybe a
It is.
conversation for another day, Drew.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I love talking about the Old Testament, and
Me as well.
I would really suggest listening to for atheists to listen to Jordan Peterson's lectures on the Old Testament, because he approaches it from a pretty psychological, secular perspective, but in a way that does justice to it, even just as a story. And it's called the psychological significance of the Bible. And so, starting with those first old stories, and they're really cool.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that. I think I've only, to be honest, heard of his big name book, which is
12
oh,
Rules for Life.
12 Rules for Life. That's exactly what it is. So, yeah, maybe I'll have to give that a check. I have been inundated with reading material as of lately. So hopefully I make the right decision and start knocking away at that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think obviously I don't agree with with the theist position that you take. I'm still remain very skeptical over that myself personally. But I think as I said at the beginning, I think the idea of trying to find some sort of middle ground so we can all live in peace among each other and regardless of our ideas, I think is a good goal to um, a good goal to be striving for.
Absolutely.
I believe that we're all human beings, and we should be able to live as humans without segregating ourselves off.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. I absolutely agree with that as well. It's well put.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for coming on, Drew. It's been a very interesting conversation. It's nice not just to talk to atheists all the time and actually have a conversation with a theist. So thank you very much
Oh,
for that.
yeah. I love talking about C.S. Lewis. There's very few times
Great.
that I get to talk to somebody about him. So, yeah, that was really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
Right, everyone. We will be going to a short intermission because we'll be getting the second guest on, Josh Yarkon. So we'll be going into a short intermission, and while we get that set up. Once again, thank you very much, Drew. And yeah, so I'll put us into intermission now. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your break. We did. And now for our second guest of tonight, we've got Josh the Archon. And I have not got the right thing. I'll sort that out in a sec so you got the right name underneath you.
I'm Drew Eldridge. That's perfectly fine.
How you doing, Drew?
I,
Yeah, so following on from what Drew was saying with the time of Jesus and what happened around that time in the Bible, what the Bible says, you're studied in anthropology and the history of that time period a little bit.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Any counter arguments at all?
I would actually state that there is a lot of evidence for a historical Jesus of Nazareth. There are evidence for this particular individual, just like how there's evidence for Muhammad and other more recent supposed prophets and everything like that. So there is evidence based on Jesus. However, what I would say is that the Bible itself is based on more of a mysticalist or mysticism of, or tries to espouse the mysticism of Jesus of Christ rather than Jesus of Nazareth in order to kind of flare it up a bit, you know? So what I would state is that at that time there was a lot of individuals claiming to be the Messiah, because this was definitely, or no, this was before the destruction of the Second Temple. So, but for them, for these particular individuals, they believed that they were going to be the new Messiah to come and to save the Jewish people, because Jesus wasn't based on saving everybody. He was particularly based on saving the Jewish individuals. It's only afterwards with Paul and so on and so forth that slowly started to expand the influence of Jesus's teachings to the outside of the Jewish I guess you could say the Jewish congregation in a sense.
that's really interesting to me, because I didn't really have the idea that a kind of a more mainstream idea was that he may have existed. That's like I say, it's interesting. I think I was more under the idea that it was a possibility, but it probably wasn't. So I don't know.
I mean, it's definitely difficult because we don't have a body, we don't have any sort of remains, we don't have anything, any tangible as of yet evidence. But the reason why we claim that there, or why historians claim at least, that there is more to the historical Jesus than the mysticism or the mystic Jesus, in a sense, where it's sort of like, oh, this was just a story based on some sort of mythological character, is based on, at first, the writings of Paul, because Paul is extremely knowledgeable within this area, obviously. And there's a lot more writings that Paul has than the writings that you see within the Bible itself. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that there are other writers, such as, I think Corinthians is also written by Paul, and I forget the other ones there. But Paul is definitely a very big source. And there are other sources that historians take. But for me, the only one that I know about is Paul at the moment, so I can only elaborate based on him.
Very cool. Do you have another another question for him, Katie?
Well, you were wanting to ask a question, weren't you, to do with Josh's knowledge?
I do have another question lined up. I'm not gonna lie. It had to do with biology and RNA and DNA. And I would love for you to tell me if I phrase this question wrong, because I tried to phrase it in a smart way instead
Okay.
of a way that I understand, and I'll give them both to you. So the question I asked was, what process perpetuated deoxyribonucleotides or nucleotides to remove the 2-hydroxyl group in order to produce deoxyribonucleic acid?
Right.
So
Yes.
why did RNA become DNA? And if
Exactly.
it didn't happen, we wouldn't be.
Actually, there's a new study that's coming out that is stating that it is very difficult for RNA to actually become DNA. So
Yeah.
what they're stating is, in this, I wouldn't say radical, but this new, or not new biologist, but he's been a biologist. He's been even a philosopher of biology as well, and he was stating that what we can see is that instead of one leading into the other, you can have both of them sort of replicating themselves because you only need to let it happen once, right? And through that one period of time, RNA could constantly repeat itself and become just more strands of RNA, and DNA can repeat itself and become more strands of DNA. Henceforth, you don't need one to actually move on to the other. Both of them can be independent but also coincide with each other and work together in order to create a structure of such as you or such as me or such as anybody else and any
See,
other living creature.
but is it not the predecessor of DNA? RNA?
We used to believe that, and I mean there is still evidence for it, but the thing is that there was a 2015 study that actually showed that it's almost, now that doesn't mean that there's a zero chance, but it's almost, actually, let me say it this way, it's extremely hard for RNA to become DNA. So that's the thing that constantly keeps ramming
So
heads
there
within.
almost must be DNA because RNA turning to DNA is such a small chance, basically.
Exactly, and the same exact thing as I believe they're called uh per pertitudes or something like that. I forget.
Yeah. Oh gosh, dang it.
So, is there any evidence that there's DNA in? Because we go back to like the single-celled organisms. Is
Mhm.
there any evidence that there was DNA in single-celled organisms?
That's a very good question.
That's a very good question. What it seems like is that there, it wasn't necessarily DNA in a sense. Shit. How could I say this? Like, yes, there
I
was
love it.
DNA within single-celled organisms, but it was more complex than that. That's the thing. Where there were other, how can I say it? Other mechanics at work as well, such as I believe it's perpetudes and also RNA as well. And then later on, because of the amalgamation of these single celled organisms, the DNA and RNA and everything like that and perpetudes became more and more and more sort of advanced in a sense.
I feel dumb. Is it peptides? I could be way off.
Peptides.
Okay, that's
You're
what it is.
correct. Peptides. So, and that's actually a really crazy thing too to talk about because peptides are even looked at. People or biologists used to think that peptides could not replicate themselves, that they had to have come from either RNA or DNA in order to create peptides in a sense. But now with new information, peptides could reproduce on their own as well. So all of these systems could be subsystems of the actual biological entity or biological form of which me, you, and everybody else and every other bloody animal is consisted of.
So, in other
It's
words,
That
just
it's still
that's really awesome.
it's still evolution, right? In that there wasn't like a start of evolution, as it was very unlikely that a single-celled organism, to our knowledge, was to re-replicate into something new. But
That
just because it was unlikely didn't mean it wasn't going to happen given
exactly.
eons of time.
I would
You
love
hit
to
it.
know what
Right
the
on the
predecessor was, though. Like, why? That's really, and I asked you the question knowing that you couldn't give me the answer. It's just like you said, it's so hard for RNA to turn into DNA. So why did it? And you're saying, well, maybe it didn't, which is completely understandable.
yeah.
But
That
if
maybe
it
they
did,
right.
like, why? What
Well,
happened to make that happen?
I think that I hate to say simple answer because it's not a simple answer, it's a hard answer. But it's also through adaptation of one's environment. One constantly needs to adapt to the environment, and henceforth, RNA and DNA are also things that must adapt. They must learn to survive in their surroundings. And hence, because of this, through the adaptations, we can actually see that over time, and we're talking again billions of years, so just for life to kick off, it was 4 billion years. No, actually, yeah, it started off around 4 billion years, but it wasn't until literally 352 million years, or I forget what it was, where
I
we
wouldn't even try to put those numbers out there. I have no idea.
where
Good job.
actual complexity of life came about, where actually we start seeing multi-cellular life, or at least complex multi-cellular life coming to existence and everything like that. So it just shows how long it takes for evolution to create things. And that's why whenever I look at somebody who's a young earth creationist, for instance, I realize that they don't understand that perception. They don't understand how things or how time fits into the equation of evolution, because time is a huge factor. If you take away time, then, or if you don't allow for a lot of time to proceed, then evolution still occurs, but it's not going to occur in the complex form that it has over billions of years or millions of years.
Yeah, exactly, and that it's time which is the most important thing, isn't it? Because even I do study in physics and things like that, and it doesn't matter if the odds of something happening is like octillion to 1. It's bound to happen at some point.
Exactly, the probability is high for something to happen somewhere. It's just a matter of time.
Speaking of probabilities being octillion to 1, I believe Katie just said, I always find it interesting that although we have evolved so largely in social standards and in technology, we could lose those social standards and lose all that technology in a flash, and the things that we hold dear are going to be substantially different than the things that we believe. I believe today. It seems like there is a lot of folly. I don't know that if there was a major world event where we had a unfortunate loss of people, that we'd be able to sustain a lot of the progress we have made.
That's a really good, like, it was a statement mixed with like a question, and I think I really like where you were going with that, because you are absolutely right. What we have now isn't a guarantee for the future. So it's literally up to the people in general, and not just the people, but those who are in power and so on and so forth, in order to hold that mantle and to propel those ideas forward, in a sense, and to hold an archive of those ideas just in case we run into a quote unquote new dark age and everything like that. So I agree with you 100%. The future isn't guaranteed. The future has multiple paths that we can go down, and most of them we cannot even foresee as of yet. So that's the most beautiful thing I think about life, is that literally, even though that we might have certain people who are determinists in a sense, and they might claim that, well, everything is determined or whatever, for me, as a probabilist, tomorrow is never certain. You don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow. You don't know if something bad is going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what the hell is going to go on tomorrow. So henceforth, the probability is always there. The probability is, as I always say, before you reach that determined path, you always have the probability that is behind that. And once you go down that determined path, that's when it becomes like an actual determined essence.
Okay. So the real question that stems from the original question statement, I know, it's ridiculous.
No, I love it. Please keep coming.
Oh, before I dang forget it. And that happens every single episode, so it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I know. We're talking about how everything could fall apart and how things could change. Oh man, Katie, do you have a question, please, so that I can try to rumble this back out of the depths of my cave brain?
I have to save you
Or
from
no.
your brain fart again. I need a graphic for on screen, don't I? You know, brain
you
fart.
do, man, because it's every time, and I felt like I was on a roll, and then it just.
Oh, don't worry about it. It always happens to me, so don't worry.
Yeah. I think I just wanted to, re-clarify on the on the the point of the odds of things happening and the probability of things happening, no matter how low that probability is. The fact that it happens, in a sense, makes it more beautiful, in my mind anyway. Makes it a much more beautiful thing that we are here over, say, God just clicked his fingers and we appeared. I think it's a much more beautiful thing when you understand the mathematics of it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I remember the question before I forget it, because it had to do with everything I just said. So now, societal, and I'm assuming that these are the names for the subcategories of evolution. Now, I could be completely wrong, but societal evolution and some sort of, electronic evolution. Is that correct? Because I know we have macroevolution and microevolution, and I didn't know if there were subcategories for these things, because in my eyes, they have to be different than biological evolution.
I don't know. Okay. Okay. When you're saying technological evolution and social evolution, in a sense, you're talking about when something finally reaches the extent of sentience, then it goes on beyond into a new sort of strata of a more conscious type of evolution, in a sense, based on the mental building blocks of our ideas and our conceptualizations. Is that what you're talking about, or am I sort of missing the point?
No, that sounds pretty right on. I mean, basically, morality change between what we have now and what we could have if everything was gone and we were fighting for our food and water. So that's basically where I'm coming from on that. The societal.
So you can definitely say that. What I would actually state is that it's more of a mental evolution, in a sense, because that's where everything is coming from.
That makes sense.
The brain itself, right? So that is where we start reaching further beyond the extent of just your normal survival. Well, actually, I can't say that, because everything is still based on survival of the fittest. No matter how your brain evolves, you are still fighting to survive as a species. Now, that's another thing that a lot of people get confused, is the aspect of survival of the fittest. They think that it's more of a Unitarian type thing. It's more of like an independent, I got to fight for my own survival. And right there, they got it wrong. Because what true survival of the fittest is based on the whole system, the whole ecology of that particular animal or that particular species. So it can only live if it can only survive or have a better chance of adaptation if they work together. You cannot not work together and think you're going to survive. Now, don't get me wrong. There are bears. There are certain animals that do it solo. But the issue
You said doo doo.
which, but the thing
Sorry.
is, don't worry, it's cool. It's cool. But the thing is that, for instance, octopus, right? These animals are one of the most are very intelligent animals that we have now. The problem is that they don't pass down that knowledge through generations. So the stuff that they learn only sticks with them themselves, the independent, and when they die, all that knowledge dissipates. So it doesn't get passed on to the next generation. Hence, even how intelligent they're unable to build a type of society in a sense because they are an independent animal.
Yeah, that's where I was getting at. Like our understanding of the world, for the most part, not everybody, isn't going to be compatible to what we're going to need to understand if we lose our commodities.
Absolutely, but also we got to remember too that even through time of crisis, that also builds some sort of altruism with people as well. Like we've seen with, let's just say, hurricanes, we've seen with tornadoes and stuff like that, these huge catastrophes that happen, and you see whole entire communities come together in order to rebuild what they once had. And you see whole communities helping each other and helping individuals who have lost their homes or who are destitute at the moment, and so on and so forth. So we can't forget how sometimes destruction in itself can lead to a more altruistic tomorrow as well. Now, I'm not advocating for it, obviously, but I'm just saying that with natural disasters or with whatever that may come in the future, we cannot just say that there's only going to be chaos, because there's also going to be individuals who are going to come together and help their communities sort of move forward and everything like that, and help those who are in need at that particular time and place.
Yeah, I don't think it's completely destitute that if something were to completely happen. I mean, of course, there's always a chance for anything, but I'm happy that you were able to put that in a very digestible way, and I'm sure once I give this a watch again, I will have some more questions for you.
Absolutely. I love questioning. I love when people ask me questions. It's
Now,
one of the
I had a thing following on from what Fad was talking about with technological evolution, and what you were mentioning about mental evolution. What are your thoughts on transhumanism? The idea that we could exist within technology in the future.
I think at first there are obviously hurdles to go over or whatever. That's the first thing that we need to kind of look at, are these hurdles. The first is how to interface the brain with technology. That's the first aspect. And are we even able to do that to begin with? Because even though that there are certain similarities, it is not made out of the same how could I say it? Computing in a sense. So in a sense, it's sort of like trying to hook up a quantum computer with your ordinary binary computer in a sense. It would not technically work. But I'm not somebody who would say that we shouldn't strive for this, because I think that that's where evolution takes us later, because with the helping of mental of evolution and with the helping of technology, that is where we are going to head, no matter what the outcome is, no matter if we run into another dark age, no matter what. That is where our technological advancement is
Is
reaching.
it not the first thing to go though?
Not at all, because it's the greatest thing that I can give as an example is the writings that the Romans had left behind and during the time of the Dark Ages. So what happened was that writing wasn't really a big thing within the Dark Age. Or actually, I shouldn't say that. Writing was a big thing because obviously biblical copying and so on and so forth. So there was writing, there was copying of the Bible, there were elaborations and texts and letters and so on and so forth that were being written, and there was a different sort of cultural buildup, the Gothic period, for instance. So there was development. It wasn't as much as we saw with ancient Rome, for instance, but there was a sense of development. Very slow, but uh, you can definitely see that there was something coming out of it. But what we realized is during the Renaissance was a huge thing that kick-started, what was it? The classical period, because people were starting to unearth these texts and everything like that, which were obviously and stuff like that of these texts. What they started to realize is the humanist perspective. The humanist perspective has been around for literally since the beginning of philosophy, but it was lost during that Dark Age. However, because we were able to find these literatures, we were able to put them back into circulation again and grow our society based on these type of literatures. Now, we're not dealing with books anymore, and we're not dealing with papers and letters and so on and so forth. We're now dealing with computers. So even though, let's just say that there is something that happens that is catastrophic, we're still going to have certain, and I'm not saying that all computers are still going to be working, but you will still have probably certain computers that if people were able to log into or whatever, or still had power within them, people would start to understand what our society kind of built up on.
Well, yeah, you can make power with water. I mean, there are so many ways to generate power outside of fossil fuels.
Exactly.
So to imagine people couldn't create enough power to get something running to bring in some information. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So.
Mm-hmm. So that's why, like, I do think that the future now is kind of in my opinion at least, is in a precarious situation because we don't know what's going to happen or whatever in the near future, let alone in the far future or whatever. So you also gotta weigh the pros and cons of what's going on with society today, and is society today working towards a more collaborative future? Are we looking more towards a more diversified and more separated future where people are going to despise one group or another? So we definitely got to look at that and see how that's going to come in the near future and in the far future afterwards.
I could see biomechanical people being, you know, looked at as less of humans in the future. You know, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely, I completely agree with you. And one of the games that I used to love playing was Deus Ex Machina, for instance.
Yeah.
And Deus Ex. Oh shit. What was it again? Mankind Divided. And these two games kind of showed that even when we do have these technologies and people are interfacing their bodies with these type of augmentations, that the normal day individual or the person who hasn't had these type of augments as of yet will probably look down upon them as not being, as you stated, human, or not being true to the pure human way, or whatever the situation may be. So obviously, you're probably right that the future is going to probably have bigoted individuals towards augmented people. 100%.
And the funny thing is, I really don't think that's the case right now. And there is a large amount of augmentation. whether it be of the mechanical type or of the, non-mechanical type. People are augmenting their bodies in all sorts of way. And unless you're doing something that would be considered outlandish, I guess, by the majority of people, it's really not looked at as such a horrible thing. Actually, in a lot of instances, it's looked at as a prestigious thing. It's funny how that could change.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree with you. Right now, there are people who are augmented. Obviously, individuals who lose limbs either at work or underneath some sort of circumstance that ended up making them, as you stated, just needing those augmentations. Individuals who can't see are now getting bionic eyes, for instance, which is fantastic, and it's just mind-blowing for me. I love it. But at the same time, what I think that we're not in yet is having mechanics or augmentations which could harm people. That's the one thing. Like most of the augmentations that we're
One
seeing.
of those steel legs would hurt if they kicked you with that shit.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
just saying.
there's a difference between being hurt and a huge difference of somebody able to kill you with one
Strength
of
and
these.
things. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. At the moment, they look at it kind of like, oh, this is needed, and also it's not dangerous. Like, yes, don't get me wrong. Somebody could run up to you and kick you in the shin, and that shit would hurt. Or somebody could like
Break
slap
your
you with
leg,
a
probably.
bionic, yeah, exactly, or slap you with a bionic arm or whatever, and that shit would hurt. But it's not something that would kill you as of yet. But when we slowly but surely start uh, making better technologies and stuff like that, then we might see something completely different in the future where people might actually be extremely nervous of being around somebody who has augmentations.
Well, and I think the beginning of this conversation, what Katie asked, and I may be wrong, Katie, was about biomechanical. And if it was, then biomechanical, if we can reach that state, then we really don't have to worry too much about the end of normal mechanics. If we're having augmented hearts that are working from the power of our own body, then, there's no need for a pulse maker or whatever, So
No, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, what I would say is that at first, are you going to make those, let's just say, biological augmentations? Are they going to be just like your normal, ordinary human heart and everything like that? Because if so, nobody's going to mind that or
it's gonna
whatever.
last longer, right?
Yeah, that's it. But it also matters of how you're going to end up augmenting or biologically augmenting the human body, because even biologically, you can do a lot of things that can make a human stronger, for instance, or make a human see further than they do, and so on and so forth, once you're able to tweak with the mechanics of biology. So again, it's all based on where the technology takes us and how people sort of view what that technology is going to do in the future, and if people are going to start splicing up different biological pieces.
Line me up.
But I hope I answered that question.
I think you did. I think you did well. I just want to be Cyborg from the Justice League. I'm straight up ready to have a mechanical body.
So we've discussed how it would be a better future, and how it's going to be probably the way that humanity is going to go. But what about the time frames on it? Is maybe I'm getting at the question of it. In your opinion, is religion slowing us down towards this better future?
Yes, I think so. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have something to believe in. If they're in the dumps, let's just say, or they have some sort of how could I say it? If they need, or the only way that they feel that they have purpose is that they need something greater than them in order to have that sense of purpose, and that something is God itself. But at the same time, these individuals are either liberal or whatever whatever the situation may be, then they're harmless. But the problem is that when we start looking at individuals that are trying to influence politics, trying to influence society, trying to influence the way how people interact with each other through religious views and stuff like that, that's where I think we are running into a lot of snags and snares because of that. Because I think that we would be far more, maybe I wouldn't, oh no, I'll say it. I think that we would be far more advanced than where we are right now. And I think that because of the religious and mostly the far right and even the right wing, and I would even say the moderates, in a sense, just sort of constantly following where the stream goes instead of trying to think outside the box. That's where we're running into issues, and that's where we need to try to enlighten people into thinking that we can be so much further than we are now.
Just in case, somebody out there wonders this, I've heard the argument, well, science is a product of Christianity. Is there anything you'd like to say on that?
Yes. Like, don't get me wrong. Did Christianity kind of help the science because they were looking for the evidence of God and so on and so forth and wanted to understand why God did what God did? Yeah, of course. But we have to understand that this idea, these conceptualizations, didn't even come from any religion. It came from philosophy. And the philosophies of those who came from Greeks and who were predominantly either paganist or materialist. So my conceptualization is kind of like, okay, well, the Christians and actually, I should just say the theists in general were building upon ideas that were already thought about beforehand. And they just built upon those. So did they help? Yes. But were they the originators? Or if, let's just say, Christianity didn't come about or any other type of theology didn't come about, then we wouldn't be where we're at today? Of course not. We would, of course, I think we would even be further than we are today, because just like how I stated beforehand, during the Roman period, they were already dealing with steam engineering and stuff like that. So if this is the case,
I had no idea about that. During Roman times they were doing with steam engineering.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. That's really cool. Sorry.
So no, it's cool. So that's what I mean. Like, the Romans were far, and don't get me wrong, yes, the Romans built upon what the Greeks brought about, and they were the real thinkers and the elaborators of philosophy. But the Romans kind of like marshaled in all these Greek individuals in order to do their philosophy and stuff like that. And that's why you had the such great architectural work, such great road work, excuse me, sorry, roadworks, or such great technological advancements for such an ancient time, let alone if you even look at the Egyptians and see their architectural monuments. They're bloody mind-boggling to see, and nobody anywhere instead of the recent time period were able to even beat the height of the pyramids. And these individuals were pagan individuals building back in that time period where we look upon ancient people as primitive, and we see that even today's day that these primitive individuals, or what we call primitive individuals, were were more not technologically, but more technically thinking individuals than what we perceive them to be. So that's
Sorry, I was just gonna say it seems like through macro evolution, like we have evolved very quickly, and of course it only goes to show that we continue to evolve quickly with the technological revolution. It just expounds upon itself. But as you were saying, it's a mindful evolution and not really an electronic or technological evolution. But even with that, and like, I think that you've given some good ideas to why this wouldn't happen. It's just, even with it being a mindful evolution, the idea that it couldn't just, like, the majority or the parts that matter of that could be gone, not because it disappeared from humans, but because the humans that understood it disappeared or whatever. Like, I'm just saying, it is folly, as where our evolution, our minds perhaps will be able to produce crops better or have some ideas, but the majority, I think, of the mindful evolution doesn't fit in with the rest of the humanistic evolution.
Actually, I would counter that.
Okay.
Because the one thing that I would say is books are power. So if
Yeah.
anybody holds a specific, now not any type of fiction or nonfiction or whatever, but actual historical books, actual books that help with understanding, let's just say archaeology, all the rest of these type of things that are out there, the technology, everything like that, we can start building afresh and building anew with these new books. The only thing that we have to do is keep a proper library or protect these books in order for, if we do run into issues in future generations, that those who are living within those crucial, hectic times could then relearn what we have lost. And that's the thing. So that's what I would hit on, is that books and knowledge is the thing that will perpetuate the ideas that we have come up with today, that maybe our children or our children's children, if the future is bleak, let's just say, might run into. Then the best thing that we can possibly do is build up on our reading knowledge and buy books and buy things so that the next generation can learn on top of those, or just like how I love the saying, to learn on top of giants, in a sense, because
Yeah,
with
stand on the shoulders of giants. Yeah.
so that's the best thing that we can possibly do. So there is a way to stave off that type of future, but it only matters if people find that knowledge is power. That's where we, even with those type of societies or bleak societies, yeah, exactly. The more you know. Oh,
I couldn't help myself.
but yeah, so that's why I'm not somebody who's a pessimist. I think that it's good to have a certain amount of pessimism, because it kind of shows you that, okay, things aren't always going to be positive. Things aren't always going to be like honky dory and flowers and rainbows and all the rest of that shit. But at the same time, what it also shows is that don't just fall into pessimism, because there's ways to rise people back up towards where we were, or maybe even greater than where we were beforehand. Like, look at the Romans time, look at the Greeks time compared to the Dark Ages. Huge contrast, right? Less writing, less actual architecture, less everything seemed to have just like delved down, right? But look at where we are right now. We have more architecture. We have more or higher amounts of technological advancement than the Romans did. So even though that we ran into that dark age, that didn't hinder us from rising above the Romans and above the Greeks and above those previous societies.
I think you hit on some
Yeah.
good points there.
Oh, very good points. But let's just assume that we're not going to that we do have a future ahead of us, and we're not going to you know, fall in a disaster or something. I think we could do with moving on to how we go about you know, getting this better future for ourselves. So moving on to the movement idea that we're actually pushing for now, me and you, Josh, and the whole group of us. I think we could do with explaining what that's about and.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. The thing, what we need, humanity is at the moment kind of lost within independency. So the thing is that a lot of people think that, okay, well, I need to be independent from that person, and I need to be independent from this person. And the problem is that we're not coming together and thinking of ideas in order to build upon the future. We are, in a sense, holding each other back because of our independence. We in a sense, now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a sense of independence, because independence is also good too, because we can't necessarily always be around and eat other people and stuff like that. It's sometimes good to be either not necessarily alone, but be just on by yourself for a bit, you know, and then after you could come right back inside society and do your thing, and after be alone for a bit again. But what I would say is that with too much independence, we slowly but surely start becoming the octopus, where we are intelligent beings, but we might not be passing on that bright future to our kids, because instead we want to be independent. We want to do our own thing and screw everybody else, in the sense. And sometimes, sadly to say, but even towards our own kids, we might think that way as well. So with this movement, what we are looking for is a sense of collaboration to bring people together. And also, so one of our first goals within the movement is to create a secularist humanist community. So that means seculars, that means atheists, agnostics, humanists, skeptics, and so on and so forth. However, many other denominations that are out there based on just these type of thought processes, and bring them together. Because the one thing is that there's a lot of people who are kind of in the fringes right now, and they feel that they don't have a proper community in order to voice their opinions, or in order to at least state which is on their mind. And this movement is going to help them with that. So that's the first goal, is to create the community. The first goal is that. The second goal is, once we get big enough, that we want to create community centers in places that are sort of hard hit with poverty and everything like that, in order to help the individuals that are there, in order to create a sense of community that will then build upon this impoverished community, and slowly but surely start to rise them into a better position that they were in beforehand. So that means vertical farms. That means now I'm forgetting the word, but self-sufficiency. That's the word that I'm looking for. Self-sufficiency and everything like that, in order, and also connectivity, so that you could be self-sufficient, but at the same exact time you could be connected to other whatever villages, towns, cities, and so on and so forth, in order to help each other out. And if there's a resource that somebody doesn't have, well, that other town, that other city, that other whatever can have those resources come, or maybe even just come through and we see how that self-sufficient society is working out, and so on and so forth. And then the last thing is to replace religion, but not with violence, but replace it through reason, replace it through our in order to provide the well-being of people, because that's the one thing. A lot of movements have tried to do this, but they failed because they were violent. No, what's up?
Thank you. I
I was just
accidentally
getting
dropped.
Justin back in.
Yes, the fad. Thank you so much, Katie. I'm sorry I dropped.
No,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. You're good.
I was enjoying the conversation so much I didn't even realise.
That's why I put it in regular chat. I was like, he's got to be reading regular chat. Cat is there, and so is JS and Math Pig.
Yes, hello, Math Pig. Thank you for joining in. That's
100%.
lovely to have you here.
Yes, 100%.
I know. I'm sorry. I keep saying that because it was something I've always said. But if you guys don't know, this is definitely a Josh term. I'm pretty sure one of the presidents said only Josh is allowed to say it. So I'll have to get my vernacular changed.
No, I seriously, I love it. I love when words slowly start to permeate, like my own made up words permeate towards other people. I'm like, yes, it's catching on. But yeah, I apologize. So I'm hope that I hit the core points, and I know that also. Oh, right, that's true. Always end up forgetting the good points. So what we are also trying to do, because we understand that people want questions, or not people want questions, people have questions and they want answers to the hard questions. And some of those answers obviously cannot be given because we just don't know. But the one thing is that we can make, let's just say, the hard questions such as death, for instance, or all the rest of these other type of thought processes, or mental health, and all the rest of these really hard questions to bring up, or whatever. This movement can tackle them because what we want to do is provide the person with the information, because we're in a technological age. So we can definitely hit up technology in order for people who are mourning for their family members and stuff like that to go into what is called, or at least given the name, the silentiums. Now, the silentiums are for people who have passed on to, or just passed on.
Yeah.
And if you really do want to have that connectivity with your family member again, we can utilize technology in order to help you come to terms with that, and also to have conversations and so on with that deceased family member through the amalgamation of what they were through, obviously through their own wanting. Obviously, we don't want to take things that they don't wish to relinquish, but through the stuff that they give to us, we can then build an amalgamation of a program that can be kind of like that person that is gone. And hopefully through technology, and hopefully through the building of technology and through neuroscience, we can then add in more complex mechanisms and mechanics in order to actually maybe one day actually have you talk to your family members that have passed on.
You could make that happen using virtual reality or hologram technology. Mixing that with artificial intelligence that has been programmed with the thoughts and memories of your loved ones. It's a very powerful idea, and it's something that hasn't been tried before in it hasn't been tried before within, other than to provide something after death, the same way that religion has. Religion has one answer, but I think it's quite powerful to use technology to give a concrete possibility instead of something that may happen, or if it happens.
Exactly. And also, in the obviously, because this is more of the future of the movement more than obviously happening now, but in the future as well, there might be a possibility where individuals can actually be within their own artificial realities, let's just say, or the deceased one is inside their own artificial reality, so they're not technically gone, but that their
Like the Star
consciousness.
Trek room.
Actually, a lot better than that. It's I got it from an actual show, and it was based on, I think it was Black Mirror.
What's
And
that room called, Katie? I'm sorry, from Star Trek, where they can live out anything and it's all. Gosh dang it! Do you know what I'm talking about?
I
No.
think so.
Ah man. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted. But if
oh,
anybody in
no
the chat
worries,
knows,
dude.
let me know because that's why that's why I was imagining. Like, you walk in and it wouldn't be enough to just like have the illusion of your dead family member there, but you would want the warmth and the feelings of what you would normally, like the atmosphere that you'd normally see that family member and everything like that. I would feel, at least.
Yeah, so the holodeck in Star Trek, is that what you're on about?
See, that is exactly what I'm on
Yeah.
about. I appreciate you.
I think it's a little bit further than that though, because instead of just holographic characters, which aren't really real in a sense, like in Star Trek, you would actually have the memories, thoughts, feelings of the actual person still living on within an AI system, which then you could
Ex-
incorporate holo technology to be able to experience that.
Yeah, but that also comes with, because the one thing is that can that data be transferred? Because if there is no such thing, let's just say, as a mind, and there's just a brain in itself, then maybe that can't be done. Because if you can't take out the how can I say it, the memories of that person, or you can't take out that information of the person or whatever, then maybe the best that we have is just an amalgamation of information based on that individual that they provide for us. But we wouldn't be able to actually get that full person because we're unable to tap into the mind in that way, because it's just the brain in itself, unless you keep the brain inside some sort of vat or something like that. But even then, it's kind of there's an issue based on that as well. So,
Are you describing a soul?
well, that's what I mean. Well, actually, I'm trying to not describe a soul, and that's why I'm saying that maybe that there is no way to take out a person's quote unquote consciousness, because there isn't something that's there. There's only the brain itself. And once the brain dies, then all things die. And that's where I think, or that's what I think the brain is. So, in a sense, if that is the case, and I am correct, and there's not a dualist perspective, then there's no way that you can have something towards that extent, unless you have the brain surviving inside, let's just say, some sort of, I don't know, android or something like that. Then maybe with the android aspect, because you're taking the brain along for the ride, and you're not taking something out of the brain which doesn't exist.
It's an interesting point. I think at this point I should shout out that we actually, I think Cat's Humanist has mentioned it in the chat already. We're actually starting a YouTube channel for the Promethean movement.
Yes.
This Thursday is the first episode. So anybody who can, that would be absolutely great if you could join us. That's the Promethean movement channel. I'll leave a link in the description of the video. And we're planning some very good stuff on that channel. We're going to be having conversations with I think we've got you on Thursday, haven't we, Josh, to do the intro for the show. But then we're going to be having debates between atheists and theists. We're going to be having debates with politicians, hopefully. We're looking to have conversations with different scientists from many different fields, teachers, police officers, basically anyone who we can discuss the ideas with and try to work on, globalizing as a human race and pushing for a better future for everybody.
That's it. Exactly. That's what we're trying to do, and I think that the Promethean Movement YouTube channel is going to be great in order to provide the people with the information that is needed about the movement in general.
Yeah.
And
So what I think we should talk about, because obviously we've been talking about these ideas which are like quite far into the future for the movement. What do you foresee the steps right at the beginning being right now? What are the steps that we need to be taking the movement in?
Okay, so the first aspect, because I think one of the steps have been complete, and that is the YouTube channel itself. To get that information out there, to get the Promethean Movement recognition, that's the first thing. The second thing is that obviously when money does start coming in, because sadly we still need to work with money in these days, when money starts coming in, what we're going to do is slowly but surely start creating places to help those who are whatever impoverished and so on and so forth, so that we can truly show that atheists and all the rest of these other and agnostics and everything like that aren't like how the theists claim we are, as being soulless individuals and dark clouded individuals, but we are humans. That's the only thing that we have is ourselves. And the only way that we can move forward is through providing ourselves with the greatest and most best future that we can give to our kids. But anyways, I'm sorry, I kind of went a bit far ahead again. So let's rewind back. So the first thing is the YouTube channel, and also what we would love to do is expand that YouTube channel a bit too into more of like an education channel based on science. We want to also try to provide a sense of calling in. So if anybody has any issues or any complaints or just want to just have a talk with one of the members of the Promethean movement, then just call in and we will have that conversation with you. And we're chill people, and we could definitely have that conversation. The other thing that we want to do is create a helpline for people. So if people are, let's just say, and I hate to say it, but let's just say suicidal or have mental issues or so on and so forth, we want to provide something to help you. And that's the best thing that we could think of for the movement, is something that could help you come to terms that life is beautiful, and that together within this community, you don't need to be a statistic. You are your own person, and you have value and you have purpose. And the purpose that you have is based on what you believe yourself to be. We want to try to help you be the best you that you can possibly be. So these things could help you out in that way.
Yeah.
Yes. And the next thing is that once these things have been set up, because the one thing is that as Borg Skeptic stated, that we will have debates, we will have conversations within the symposium, we will have conversations within the crucible, we will have debates. But the one thing that truly matters is you. So that's what our content is going to be mostly about, is you. It's not going to be about debating. Yes, it's going to be about conversation. So if you want to come on and tell your story, please, it would be fantastic to hear from you. so that we know of the perspectives of other individuals and ordinary people. Because yes, it's great to hear about the most educated of us, but at the same exact time, the ordinary people need to have a say as well, and they need to get what's on their chest and off their chest out in the open if they wish. We don't wish to force you to do anything that you don't want to. And then the next thing is that there was another great idea that was given actually by the Fad himself, by going out and having conversations with those who are on the street. Just talking and literally being a realistic talk about normal people's lives.
You know,
And
I sent those videos to Randolph, and the only reason I unlisted them in the first place is because I was going through an unfortunate rebranding. But I'm really thinking about unlist or relisting them, and I will send you the link because some of the videos talking to the homeless are quite interesting.
exactly. And I would love to listen to it. And seriously, I would love to continue it because I think that these individuals who don't have a voice have a great story to tell everybody, and an educational story as well as an understanding of their actual situations. And this is something that is going to be beneficial for people to hear in general. And these are the steps that I think that are going to help move society forward, because people will understand that this is not a movement that is based on self-centered ideologies. This is a movement that is based on the people themselves. And in order to help the people to realize the potential that they truly have. So this is why I think, if for the near future at least, what the Promethean movement truly has to offer its viewers and the people at large.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this movement. I think it sounds absolutely amazing, and I hope that viewers and that, I think it's a good idea as well. And I would, like to invite everybody. I'm sure Josh would as well. Like to invite everybody who is watching to, check us out. I've left the web page in the chat. I'll also leave that in the description. Our webpage is www.promethean-movement.com. So please check that out, and if you can join the Facebook or the Discord group, all the help would be much appreciated.
Absolutely. And remember, the number one thing is that we understand that you have lives. That's the one thing. So it's not something that is mandatory. It's not something that you need to put on the top of your list. No. This is just voluntary. So if you're still on the fence, you're like, it sounds good, but I don't know yet. That is your right to do so. Because in the end, what we want is people who truly do want to help this movement grow. And I think that all of you would be beneficial. But as I stated, if you're not ready yet, if you're not prepared yet, then it is fine by me, and it's fine by everybody else. Because we really want you to feel comfortable when you come in and when you want to be finally part of this great movement. So I really think that this is going to be a big step for people in general and for humanity as a whole. And I can't wait in order to have either you guys or anybody else come in and help this movement grow. Because that's the thing. This is a grassroots movement. This isn't anything from up to down. This is grassroots. And from grassroots, that means that we want those who are the builders of society. That is you. That's not the upper echelon, though of course we would obviously accept the upper echelon to come in, but it's predominantly you. So I hope, just like how the Borg Skeptic stated, I truly hope that you guys are interested. And as I stated, if you just want to dip your toes in it, but not really be part of it as of yet, then that is perfectly fine too.
Yeah,
So
it's a
it's
slow
awesome being
process,
so
but we'll get
open.
there. Definitely.
If only everyone was so open. And I think that's the heart of the movement, isn't it?
It really
Yeah.
is to be open, is to be you. And that's the greatest thing. Why be somebody else when there's only one unique you?
Yeah. Yeah, man. And that's how I feel. We have this life, and apparently we have these identities. So just live it to the best you can and get ready for some rest. And
I
I look
love that.
forward to the rest because life can be exhausting.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I mean, what's the point of these? I think we mentioned earlier about bigoted views that some people have, and and that is what is slowing down society. Along partly because of religion, partly because of the far right. We have these people who seem to think that we all need to be segregated away from one another because we have different colour skin, or we believe different things, or we think slightly differently than the next person. But we're all individuals, but at the same time as being all individuals, we're all human. And that's what we need to start focusing on, is we can be individuals, but we can also be a global community.
That's it. That's it. Now, I see a really good question by Wes.
Mm?
And do we have a Twitter? We don't have a Twitter as of yet,
No.
but I would definitely create one in order to have Twitter individuals or people who only use Twitter to want to be part of the movement and utilize that platform in order to interact and see what the movement or how the movement is doing every step of the way.
Wes, I want you to know the question we were talking about earlier this morning. Josh gave a very digestible, very coherent answer to it. So I expect you to go back and watch this episode at least 3 times.
No, it's just because the thing is that I find that people can, and I mean, obviously so. And there's a good reason for it because the times that we live in too aren't made for great positivity. There's a lot of pessimism which is going on. So a lot of people believe that, okay, well, that's well, not that's it, but it is what it is, and we'll just roll with the punches and we'll just keep moving forward. But the thing is that you don't need to say, well, it is what it is. There's an opposite to that, and that is through positivity we can literally build something better, and not only build something better but fight for something better as well. So that's why pessimism is good, but should also be countered by positivity in order to realize that we are not stuck within our positions that we're in at the moment, and that the tomorrow doesn't need to be bleak, but it can be a hell of a lot better than how we grew up. But that's only through our actions. Nobody else can do it but us.
Yeah, we have to start taking control of our own futures, and if we want to see a day when we all live in peace with one another, then it's us that need to do something about it. We can't just wait for the leaders who have the leaders of today who have no invested interest in that future.
Yeah, it's definitely going to have to be a unified movement of people that are determined to bring this together. So
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, yes, the leaders of today have all of the leaders of today and the rich of today have all of the power, but they only make up like 1% of our population. If the other 99% rise up and have their say, then it doesn't matter how much power or money they have. That's 99% of people is a very powerful thing as well.
Exactly. And that's one of the other reasons why I I think that the movement is going to be good for people in general is because we do want to try to bridge the gap between the religious and those who are secularists, because we do need to live side by side with these individuals. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we have to agree with them.
Yeah.
But we can have civil discourse over situations. So that's the one thing that I think this movement will help, is help bring about this civil discourse of what's going to, and also, as I stated, because religions will never completely just dissipate. That's not what they do. They mutate, they transform, and they become something else. Another new religion. But the aspect is that if we have a community of individuals or whatever that utilize critical thinking, that utilize reason, that utilize all these things that can help us move forward, then we will not be sold this type of snake oil that people have been selling us for so long.
Yeah.
And we will be able to stand up to it and say, no, we are not going to agree with such an ideology, and we're not going to agree with such a stance.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think that's coming up with about time now. I'm not actually sure how long the stream's been going because it cut out halfway through for a couple of seconds and restarted the timer. So
We could literally talk to Josh for hours on hours, I believe.
if we continue going, we'd probably be here for the next 10 hours.
Yeah, I would be happy. I don't know if Josh could handle that.
I can definitely handle that. No, my friend, I can handle it.
That's what I'm
I got
saying.
my snacks, and with me and my snacks, we are good to go.
Has the EA show got those sayings copyrighted at all? Because I could bring them over here as well.
No,
you know?
Dude, that would be hilarious if Justin came down on you. I think technically, Josh, you would be the owner of those sayings, but I don't know about the graphics.
No, I wouldn't be the owner of the graphics, just the sayings.
Yeah, so I think we should wrap that up there because we were wanting to have a little small meeting, weren't we, for the Promethean movement afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think we're best off wrapping that up right there. Thank you very much for coming on, Josh. That was absolutely brilliant of you.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it would have been a rather short show tonight.
Thank you for having me, guys, both of you. I love it.
Oh, as well, Katie, thank you once again for letting me co-host this show. I always leave this show a little bit more well-versed in the world. So I appreciate that.
And thank you once again, Justin, for coming on. That was absolutely brilliant. And thank you to all of the viewers and those in the chat. Thank you very much for keeping the conversation interesting there and watching me once again. Yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to have a new channel on the Promethean Movement channel on Thursday, so please do check that out. I will get a link put in. I haven't got bots on this chat, so I haven't been able to put that in midstream. But I will get that sorted after the stream. The next show that I'm doing is another episode of the Liberated Borg show on Wednesday evening. Not 100% certain on the time yet, but we're going to be covering the Caleb and Sophia cartoons from the Jehovah's Witness propaganda videos. So that should be quite interesting. Other than that, please remember that ignorance is never bliss, and the Borg Skeptic show, assimilation of knowledge. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.